plaintiffs 3, the flyer. Okay. You wish to approach the witness in turn?
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Davis, I just handed you the flyer that you mentioned to the jury on direct examination.
Absolutely.
Now, this is the flyer that Casey French was distributing outside the polling place in District 12.
Yes, this was the flyer that I saw.
Now, it details a residency requirement to vote, doesn't it?
Yes, as I talked about earlier, it talks about a residency requirement, an education requirement, and a validation of diploma requirement.
Now, all three of these requirements are false, aren't they?
Yes, from everything that we found, these are false accusations provided to the voters by Casey French.
So anyone involved with distributing this information would be committing election fraud, wouldn't they?
Absolutely, and the only person that we can conclusively say was presenting these flyers to the voters was Casey French.
We'll get to that in a moment. But first, I'd like to talk to you a little more about Max Heisman's campaign. Your Honor, wish to approach the bench and retrieve the strategy memo, which is Plaintiff 7, I believe.
You may.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Davis, I'm sorry, Dr. Davis, I've just handed you a strategy memo from the Heisman campaign.
Absolutely.
Now, this memo talks about two methods the Heisman campaign was going to be using.
Yes, it did.
The first one is called erosion, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And it talks about eroding support for Miss Ginger.
Yes, it does, with legal tactics involving talking about Ginger and her affiliations with her schooling and what she is trying to do for her campaign run.
And now the second one is called education, isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely. But once again, these actions described here are not illegal. They may be questionable, but not illegal. And what is outlined in this memo and what is outlined in this memo are totally different strategies.
Well, actually, you'd say there's some similarities between this memo, the education in this memo, and the education occurring in that flyer, wouldn't you?
Well, yes, they both talk about education.
And in your opinion, you would say that this demonstrates there could be a link between the Heisman campaign and this flyer.
There could be, but it's rather far-fetched.
But you would agree that there's at least some indication of a link between Max Heisman and his campaign and voter fraud, isn't there?
I wouldn't say that directly, but there is a similarity between the ideas in this memo and the ideas on this flyer.
First, approach the witness to retrieve documents.
You may.
Now, in 2011, 19.5% of registered voters in District 12 actually voted, didn't they?
That's true.
And under normal circumstances, you would expect that number, the percentage of registered voters who vote, to stay constant from election to election.
That's always the hope, but it's never a guarantee. You can never really tell how people are going to react from election to election.
Well, in this case, in District 12, you would say that it's a conservative estimate that at least 19.5% of registered voters would have voted, wouldn't you?
That was the hope, but multiple polling places had given differing opinions. From what we found, yes, it was.
And in fact, there was a 20% increase in the number of registered voters for the 2015 election, wasn't there?
Yes.
Now, 19.5% of registered voters didn't actually vote in 2015, did they?
No, the actual voter-to-voter registered ratio had dropped down to 15%.
That's right, that's a 4.5% drop, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, if 19.5% of registered voters had voted in District 12, Elizabeth Ginger would have won the mayoral election, wouldn't she?
That's with the assumption that people would have voted for Ginger on a reasonable basis of popularity, if you will, a percentage, a ratio. But that's also assuming that there's no fraud. There's no way to tell how the voters would have voted absent of any fraud.
Well, actually, that's not quite true, because you would conclude that absent any fraud, Elizabeth Ginger would have won the mayoral election.
Built on
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation.
Your Honor, this witness has been qualified as an expert in elections, how they're conducted, and how to analyze those results. He's already been established as qualified to answer on what could have happened given a hypothetical situation and how the vote totals may have turned out. This is well within his expert qualifications and is not speculative.
Brief response. Your Honor, both in direct and cross-examination, this witness has stated that it is impossible to determine who would have won this election absent fraud.
I would tend to agree that it's borderline speculative, but I'm going to allow it overruled.
Yes, Your Honor.
That you would agree that absent any fraud, Elizabeth Ginger would have won the 2015 mayoral election.
It is in every single way, shape, or form impossible to tell if Ginger would have won this election absent of any fraud. Though the ratios say that that is the most likely outcome, you can never tell how voters would have voted absent of any fraud.
Is it your testimony in court today that absent of any fraud, Elizabeth Ginger would not have won the 2015 Truman mayoral election?
Well, absolutely. It depends on the percentage of voters that would have actually voted. You're assuming a percentage of voters, the popularity assumption, and the fact that there's no fraud. That's three assumptions. My assumption goes on the one.
Permission to approach opposing counsel. This is, we're discussing 38. Permission to approach the witness in turn with the audit of the election.
With what?
The witness's audit of the election.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Davis, I just handed you the audit you prepared for today's case, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Now, this is a report of all of your findings,
Yes, it is.
and you included all the relevant information and all of your conclusions, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention to page 6, paragraph 38.
All right.
I'm going to read aloud, and I'd like you to read silently with me. Taking the instances of fraud collectively, this audit concludes Ginger would have won the election absent any fraud. Did I read that correctly?
That is absolutely true, sir. But you are assuming that all of the instances of fraud are in this. Without fraud in general, if the percentages had made it to 19.5%, if there had been no fraud, and if all of the voters who supported Ginger would have gone towards those votes, then Ginger would have won the election.
What I'm asking is about your conclusions regarding fraud as a whole. All of the different instances of fraud you discussed. And you would conclude, you put it in this report, that absent any fraud, Ginger would have won the election, yes or no?
Well,
Objection,
sir.
Your Honor.
What grounds?
Asked and answered in compound question.
Well, one, it has been asked, but the extent to the answer is up for debate. He seems to be equivocating on that, and it's not really a compound question. It's pretty simple, and he can answer it overruled.
So, Mr. Davis, absent any fraud, Elizabeth Ginger would have won the 2015 mayoral election, wouldn't she?
That is absolutely impossible to conclude, and I even state that within my report on paragraph 28. It's difficult to estimate and impossible to determine with any certainty how voters would have behaved absent of any fraud.
However, while you can't predict voter behavior, you can predict the election. And absent the specific fraud you discussed, Elizabeth Ginger would have won.
That is with the assumption that you're also predicting the voter behavior. If you can't predict the voter behavior, you can't ultimately predict the outcome.
No further questions, Your Honor. Person to approach and retrieve the document.